The moment Monica set that old cardboard box on the coffee table, my mother's face went white. Not pale, white. She stared at the black marker writing across the lid, then glanced toward the cameraman standing beside our fireplace. "Before this interview ends," Monica said calmly, "I think everyone deserves to see what's inside." My mother shot to her feet so fast she knocked over her water glass. "Turn that camera off." The room went silent except for the water dripping onto the hardwood floor. The cameraman did not move. Neither did Monica. My mother rushed toward him, one hand raised as if she might cover the lens herself. I said, "Turn it off." Until that moment, she had spent nearly 20 minutes crying for the audience, telling millions of strangers that I had abandoned her after my father died. She had described herself as a lonely widow and me as an ungrateful son who had chosen an ambitious wife over his own family. But the instant she saw that box, the tears disappeared. And for the first time that afternoon, everyone watching saw fear in her eyes. To understand why that box terrified her, I have to take you back almost 50 years to a time when my parents were still young and believed hard work could solve nearly every problem. My father, Richard Harper, and my mother, Linda, married in their 20s. They spent the first years of their marriage building a small manufacturing business outside Columbus, Ohio. Harper Industrial Systems began in a rented warehouse with 6 employees, 2 aging machines, and more debt than either of them liked to admit. They always planned to have children once the company became stable. But stability took years. By the time the business finally began making a real profit, my parents had been married for 8 years. They had also endured several failed fertility treatments and more disappointment than they ever discussed openly. My mother stopped attending baby showers. My father stopped mentioning the empty bedroom at the end of the hall. Then one evening, he suggested adoption. He did not describe it as a backup plan. He told my mother he wanted to bring home an infant, give that child their name, and raise him with the same love they would have given a biological son. After months of conversations, paperwork interviews, and home visits, they adopted me when I was only a few months old. My father used to tell me he remembered the exact weight of my body the first time he held me. He said, I opened my eyes, wrapped my hand around his finger, and made him feel like a father before he had even left the agency. For the first 5 years of my life, I never doubted that I belonged. My mother read to me every night. My father built me a wooden train table in the basement. On Saturdays, he sometimes took me to the factory and let me sit in his office drawing pictures while he worked. I had no idea I had been adopted. To me, Richard and Linda Harper were simply mom and dad. Then, after years of being told it would probably never happen, my mother became pregnant. I was 5 when Ethan was born. I remember standing beside his hospital bassinet, looking at his tiny red face and promising I would always protect him. My father smiled and put his hand on my shoulder. I thought Ethan's arrival had completed our family. It took me many years to understand that it had also created a line through the middle of it, a line my father refused to recognize, and one my mother would spend the rest of her life making impossible to ignore. When Ethan came home from the hospital, I thought having a little brother was the greatest gift I could ever receive. I wanted to help with everything. I fetched diapers when my mother asked. I sang to him when he cried. As he grew older, I shared my toys, taught him how to ride a bicycle, and walked him to school whenever our schedules lined up. Looking back now, I realize Ethan never treated me like anything other than his older brother. The problem in our family was never Ethan. It was what slowly happened inside my mother's heart. At first, the changes were almost invisible. If a teacher complimented my report card during a parent conference, Mom would smile politely before saying, "Ethan is creative in different ways." If neighbors praised me after a baseball game, she'd quickly tell them Ethan had scored 2 goals in his soccer match that weekend. None of that seemed unusual. Parents compare children all the time, or so I thought. As the years passed, the comparisons became harder to ignore. Whenever I accomplished something, my mother found a reason to redirect the attention toward Ethan. It wasn't that she openly criticized me. She simply couldn't let me have a moment without reminding everyone that Ethan deserved recognition too. Ironically, Ethan never asked for any of it. He was 5 years younger than I was and one of the gentlest kids I've ever known. When I won a statewide science competition in high school, he was the first person waiting outside the auditorium. He hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my trophy. "I'm going to be as smart as you someday," he said. I laughed. "You'll be better." He grinned. I don't know about that. He truly meant it. There wasn't an ounce of jealousy in him. If anything, he believed in me even more than I believed in myself. My father noticed the growing tension long before I did. One evening after my high school graduation, our relatives spent nearly an hour congratulating me. On the drive home, Mom barely spoke. Dad waited until she went upstairs before finding me on the back porch. He handed me a glass of iced tea and sat beside me. "You've been wondering why your mother seems distant lately." I nodded. "I probably talk too much." He shook his head. "No. Maybe I make Ethan feel left out." Again he shook his head, then he looked directly at me. "Listen carefully. You have never done anything wrong by working hard." I stared at him. He continued quietly. "Never apologize for doing your best." Those words stayed with me for the rest of my life. Dad tried talking to Mom many times. I didn't hear every conversation, but I heard enough. He would remind her that children weren't competitors. She would insist he was the one favoring me. Neither convinced the other. Dad believed time would heal whatever resentment had begun growing inside her. He was wrong. After college, I earned a degree in industrial engineering before joining Harper Industrial Systems at 25. Dad refused to give me an executive office. I started on the production floor, learned every machine, worked overnight shifts, and spent years solving problems alongside employees who had been with the company longer than I'd been alive. 5 years later, Ethan graduated with a business degree. He joined the company too. We couldn't have been more different. I loved operations, manufacturing, and solving impossible logistical problems. Ethan thrived with people. Employees trusted him. Customers remembered him. He had a gift for making everyone feel respected. Together, we made a surprisingly good team. Dad often joked that I kept the company running, while Ethan reminded everyone why it mattered. The business grew steadily. Contracts expanded. Employees stayed. For the first time in years, Dad looked relaxed when he walked through the factory. One afternoon, after watching Ethan and me finish a leadership meeting, he smiled to himself. "I can finally see the future," he said. I smiled back. Mom didn't. She watched us from the doorway with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was fear. And although I couldn't understand it then, that fear would soon change every one of our lives. 10 years passed faster than any of us expected. By then, I was 45. Ethan had just turned 40. Harper Industrial Systems had grown from a respected regional manufacturer into a company with several facilities across Ohio and neighboring states. We employed hundreds of people, many of whom had spent decades with us. Dad often said a company wasn't measured by its annual revenue. It was measured by how many families depended on it every Friday when payroll went out. I never forgot that. By then, I had become Chief Operating Officer. My days were filled with factory visits, supplier negotiations, safety meetings, and solving problems before they became disasters. Ethan had found his own place within the company. He oversaw employee relations, community outreach, and leadership development. If I focused on machines and systems, Ethan focused on people. Our strengths were different, but they fit together naturally. One afternoon, Dad watched Ethan and me present a long-term expansion plan to the board. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "I couldn't have built this without you." I smiled. "You already did." He shook his head. "I built a business. You helped build an institution." I didn't know those words would become one of our last private conversations before everything changed. A few months later, Dad collapsed during a meeting. At first, he blamed exhaustion. Then came the tests, the scans. The biopsy, stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctors were honest. Treatment might buy him time. It would not cure him. Dad accepted the diagnosis with remarkable calm. Mom didn't. She threw herself into researching clinical trials and experimental treatments. Ethan refused to leave the hospital for days. I handled the company while spending every evening beside Dad's bed. One night, after everyone else had gone home, he asked me to close the door. His attorney was already waiting inside. A thick folder sat on the table. Dad didn't waste time. "I've updated my estate plan." I nodded. "I've also decided who will succeed me as CEO." I looked down. "I don't think we should discuss business tonight." "We have to." He waited until I met his eyes. "I'm naming you." Before I could answer, the attorney quietly excused himself, leaving the room. Dad leaned back against the pillows. This isn't about loving one son more than the other. I know. No. He smiled faintly. I need you to hear me say it. He explained that Ethan was an outstanding leader of people, but the company faced increasingly complex manufacturing challenges. It needed someone who understood every production line, every supplier, every engineering decision, and every risk. It needs you. I swallowed hard. What about Ethan? He agrees. I wasn't surprised. My brother and I had talked about succession before. Neither of us saw leadership as a prize. We saw it as responsibility. The real surprise came later that evening. After the attorney returned, Dad handed him another envelope. This one is only for David. The attorney left again. Dad waited until we were alone. Then he placed a worn manila folder in my hands. Before you open that, his voice caught for the first time all day. I need you to know something. I opened the folder. The first page read Certificate of Adoption. My name, Richard Harper, Linda Harper. The date they had brought me home, I couldn't breathe. For several long seconds, I simply stared. The words wouldn't come. Dad reached across the bed and squeezed my hand. You were only a few months old. Everything suddenly made sense. Mom's distance, the comparisons, the invisible wall I had felt my entire life. I looked at him. Did Mom? He nodded slowly. She loved you. She truly did. Then Ethan was born. I closed my eyes. So, I wasn't imagining it. No. A tear rolled down Dad's face. But listen to me carefully. He squeezed my hand harder. I did not choose you because I felt sorry for you. I chose you because you're the best person to protect this company. If Ethan had been the better choice, I would have chosen Ethan. I believed him, because my father had never lied to me. Then he reached for a sealed envelope. Don't open this until the day you no longer know what family means. I tucked it inside the folder. I promise. Dad smiled. You have never been an outsider. You became my son the moment I decided to be your father. 3 weeks later, Richard Harper died peacefully at home, and before the flowers on his grave had even begun to wilt. My mother asked me to give everything back. The funeral ended on a gray Thursday afternoon. Friends, employees, neighbors, and business partners filled the church until there wasn't an empty seat left. I shook hundreds of hands that day. Every conversation sounded the same. Your father was a good man. He changed a lot of lives. We're praying for your family. I appreciated every word. But by the time the last guest left the cemetery, I felt like I had aged 10 years. Dad had been gone less than 4 hours when Mom asked if we could talk privately. She led Ethan and me into my father's office. His reading glasses were still sitting on the desk. His favorite coffee mug hadn't been washed. For one impossible second, I expected him to walk through the door. Instead, Mom closed it behind us. I'll be direct, she said. The company belongs with Ethan now. I looked at her quietly. Dad already made that decision. He made the wrong one. Her voice was calm, almost businesslike. You know the truth now. She didn't say the word. She didn't have to. You aren't Richard's biological son. The sentence landed harder than I expected, even though I'd learned the truth weeks earlier. Mom continued, if you're going to marry Monica, then do the honorable thing. Step aside. I asked only one question. Would that make you happy? She answered without hesitation. Yes. The room fell silent. I thought about Dad's last weeks. I thought about the adoption papers. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn a place that apparently had never truly been mine in my mother's eyes. Then I nodded. All right. Mom blinked. You'll resign? Yes. And your shares? I'll transfer those too. For the first time in years, I saw relief wash across her face. She honestly believed the conversation was over. It wasn't. A chair scraped across the hardwood floor. Ethan stood up. No. Mom frowned. What do you mean, no? I mean no. He turned toward me. You're stepping down as CEO. I nodded. I think it's the right thing to do. He looked genuinely disappointed. I don't. I tried to explain. Ethan, I just found out I'm adopted. Dad loved you. He loved me too. But this company, he interrupted me. This company is Dad's responsibility, not his love. Then he looked at Mom. I'll become CEO. She smiled. Finally. Until Ethan continued. But David keeps every single share Dad left him. Mom's smile vanished. What? He earned them. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. She looked at me as though I had somehow manipulated my younger brother. I hadn't. In fact, I was just as stunned. Ethan. He walked over and placed the transfer documents back in my hands. I'm not taking these. They belong to you. They belong to Dad. And Dad gave them to you. I shook my head. I'm not his blood. He laughed once. A sad, tired laugh. No. You're something better. I stared at him. You're the brother who taught me to ride a bike. The brother who stayed up helping me study. The brother who never once made me feel like I was 5 years younger. He pointed toward Dad's empty chair. Do you honestly think he spent 40 years building this company just so I'd erase his final decision? Neither of us spoke. Finally, Ethan said the words I'll never forget. I'll accept the responsibility. But I won't accept the love Dad left for you. My throat tightened. He continued. Those shares aren't charity. They're not compensation. They're not pity. They're the thank you Dad never stopped giving you. Mom walked out without another word. It would be weeks before she spoke to either of us again. A month later, Monica and I were married in a small church outside Columbus. There were fewer than 50 guests. Dad's chair remained empty. Mom didn't come. Ethan did. He stood beside me as my best man. After our honeymoon, I officially resigned as CEO. Ethan took over exactly as Dad had planned. I remained a shareholder but never interfered with the company's decisions. One evening, Monica spread our financial statements across the kitchen table. We're not touching a dollar of your dividends. I looked up. What do you mean? They came from Richard. She smiled softly. Let's make sure his kindness keeps reaching people. Together we created the Harper Hope Foundation. Every quarterly dividend check went directly into the foundation. Scholarships, adoption support, emergency grants, job training, families in crisis. Not one penny paid for our house. Not one penny funded our own business. We would build that ourselves. Year after year, I still mailed birthday cards, Christmas gifts, Mother's Day flowers, and handwritten letters to Mom. Every single one came back unopened. Monica never threw them away. She placed each returned envelope into an old cardboard box in the hall closet. One day she told me quietly, "Don't get rid of these. I think they'll matter someday." Neither of us knew just how right she was. Building a company from scratch at 45 is a very different experience than building one at 25. When you're young, failure feels temporary. When you're older, failure feels expensive. Monica and I understood exactly what we were risking. She already owned a small technology startup specializing in precision software for advanced manufacturing systems. It had promise, but promise doesn't pay salaries. We rented a modest office in Columbus. There were 8 employees, 2 folding tables, used computers, and just enough cash to survive a few months. Every morning began before sunrise. Every evening ended long after dark. I handled operations, manufacturing strategy, and client relationships. Monica led engineering, product development, and business strategy. More than once, one of us had to remind the other why we had started. There were months when we paid every employee but postponed our own paychecks. One project failed so badly that I sat alone in the office after everyone left, convinced we had reached the end. "We're out of time," I told Monica. She quietly looked over the numbers. "No, we're out of the wrong strategy." She crossed out nearly half our business plan with a red pen. "We're trying to be useful to everyone. Let's become essential to someone." That decision changed everything. Instead of chasing dozens of industries, we focused entirely on advanced aerospace manufacturing. It was risky. It was also the first decision that truly fit both of our strengths. Within 2 years, we secured our first major aerospace contract. Another opened the door to federal research partnerships. Then came the phone call neither of us ever expected. Our company had been selected to participate in a technology development program supporting future aerospace manufacturing projects connected with NASA. Neither Monica nor I celebrated very much that day. We simply sat in silence after signing the agreement. Finally, she reached across the conference table and squeezed my hand. "We did it," I smiled. "No, we survived." She laughed. And surviving was the hard part. As the business continued growing, something unexpected happened. People became just as interested in our foundation as they were in our company. Every quarter, the dividend checks from Harper Industrial Systems arrived exactly as they always had. Every quarter, every dollar went directly into Harper Hope Foundation. We funded scholarships for adopted children, emergency grants for families facing medical crises, job training for young adults leaving foster care, programs helping grandparents raising grandchildren. We never announced donations before making them. We never named buildings after ourselves. Monica insisted the foundation exist for one reason only. Richard loved one little boy enough to call him his son. She once told our board, "If that love stops with us, we've wasted the greatest gift he ever gave." Those words found their way into a newspaper article. The newspaper article became a magazine interview. The magazine interview led to a feature in Forbes highlighting entrepreneurs using business success to strengthen local communities. A few months later, CNN aired a short segment about Harper Hope Foundation. The reporter asked Monica why she devoted so much energy to philanthropy instead of simply expanding the business. She smiled exactly the way she'd smiled across our kitchen table years earlier. This foundation began with a father's love. She never mentioned adoption. She never mentioned family conflict. She never criticized my mother. She simply honored my father's memory. After the program aired, something interesting happened. People recognized Monica everywhere, at airports, charity events, business conferences. Many people knew her name before they ever learned mine. I was perfectly happy with that. My mother wasn't. According to Ethan, she watched every interview, read every article, collected every newspaper clipping. The more respected Monica became, the quieter my mother grew. One evening, Ethan came by our house for dinner. After the meal, he lingered while Monica cleared the table. "I should probably warn you about something," he said. I looked at him. "Mom's been talking." "About what?" "You." He hesitated. "And Monica." I sighed. "She still thinks Monica took me away from the family." He nodded slowly. "She honestly believes that." A week later, Monica received an email from the production team of Nolan Price, one of America's best-known long-form YouTube interview hosts. He wanted to feature our company, our foundation, and the story behind both. We almost declined. Public attention had never interested either of us. Then came a second message. Nolan wrote that my mother had contacted his team personally. She said she wanted to be there for a long overdue family reunion. Monica looked at me. "What do you think?" I stared at the email for a long time. Maybe. Just maybe. After 11 years, my mother was finally ready to come home. The interview was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Nolan Price's team arrived first. They were professional, friendly, and efficient. One producer walked through our living room explaining where everyone would sit, while another adjusted lights that looked more like floor lamps than television equipment. Nothing about it felt sensational. Nothing suggested we were about to become the center of an online storm. Nolan himself shook my hand. "I appreciate you doing this," he said. "I know your foundation prefers to stay out of the spotlight." "We're here to talk about the work," I replied. "That's exactly what I want." I believed him. Looking back, I think he believed it too, at least in the beginning. About 20 minutes later, the front door opened. My mother walked in. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. For a brief moment before anyone spoke, I saw the woman who had once tucked me into bed and read me bedtime stories. I stepped forward. "Hi, Mom." She hugged me. The embrace lasted only a few seconds, but something felt strange. Her face wasn't turned toward me. It was turned slightly toward one of the cameras. Monica greeted her warmly. "It's good to see you, Mom." Linda nodded politely. "Thank you for inviting me." Everyone settled into the living room. Nolan began exactly as promised. He asked Monica about our company. He asked me about manufacturing. He asked how Harper Hope Foundation chose the families it supported. The conversation flowed naturally. Monica explained that every dollar distributed by the foundation came from one source. My husband's dividends from Harper Industrial Systems. Nolan looked surprised. You've never used that income personally, she smiled. No, that money came from Richard Harper. It belongs in the lives of people who need hope more than we need a bigger house. Nolan wrote something in his notebook. Then he turned toward my mother. Mrs. Harper, what does it feel like watching your son and daughter-in-law build something like this? For a second, she simply stared at him. Then tears filled her eyes. At first, I thought they were real. I wish Richard could have seen it, she whispered. So do I answered quietly. She nodded. Then everything changed. But Richard never imagined this would cost me my son. The room became still. Nolan frowned slightly. What do you mean? My mother took a tissue from her purse. The day David married Monica, I lost him. I opened my mouth. She kept talking. He stopped coming home. He stopped checking on me. After my husband died, I was alone. She looked toward Monica. I don't blame my son. I blame the woman who convinced him he didn't need his family anymore. Monica didn't interrupt. She simply folded her hands in her lap. Nolan glanced between us. I wasn't aware there had been a family estrangement. There has, my mother answered. For 11 years. She described herself as a widow abandoned by her oldest son. She said I had chosen business success over family, that I had never visited, never called, never reached out. Technically, she never said I hated her. She didn't have to. She painted a picture that allowed everyone listening to reach that conclusion themselves. I noticed one of Nolan's producers looking down at a tablet. The live stream comments were already pouring in. I hadn't even known the interview was being broadcast live. Nolan looked uncomfortable. David, would you like to respond? I looked at my mother. There was still time. She could tell the truth. She could say she'd returned every letter, every card, every gift. Instead, she lowered her eyes and whispered, I just wanted my family back. The comments exploded. People were sympathizing with her, calling me cold, calling Monica manipulative. For the first time all afternoon, Monica spoke. Her voice remained calm. Nolan, is this interview live? He hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, Monica looked at him. You told us it would be edited before release. He glanced toward my mother. Mrs. Harper requested a live conversation. Everything suddenly made sense. This wasn't a reunion. It wasn't even an interview. It was an ambush. I felt anger rising in my chest. Not because strangers believe lies, because after 11 years, my mother had finally found a way to return to my life, only to wound me one more time. Monica reached over and gently squeezed my hand beneath the coffee table. Then she stood. If you'll excuse me for just a moment. My mother looked almost relieved. Perhaps she thought Monica was overwhelmed. Perhaps she thought she'd already won. Without saying another word, Monica walked toward the hallway. 2 minutes later, she returned carrying an old cardboard box. She set it carefully on the coffee table. Then she looked directly at my mother. Before we finish this interview, I think everyone deserves to see what's inside. My mother looked at the box as if it contained a live grenade. The color drained from her face. She wasn't looking at Monica anymore. She was staring at the faded shipping labels, the return stamps, the familiar handwriting. No, she whispered. Monica rested one hand gently on the lid. Mom, I think it's time. My mother suddenly sprang from the sofa. Turn that camera off, she pointed at Nolan. I said turn it off right now. The room froze. Nolan looked genuinely confused. Mrs. Harper, turn it off. For a long second, nobody moved. Then Monica quietly opened the box. Inside wasn't a legal file. There were no court documents, no financial records, no hidden recordings. There were only ordinary things: birthday cards, Christmas cards, Mother's Day letters, anniversary notes, wedding photographs, family pictures, small wrapped gifts, and on nearly every envelope, a bright red postal stamp. Return to sender. Monica lifted the first bundle. This was mailed 6 weeks after David and I were married. She placed it on the table. Returned unopened. She picked up another. Christmas. Another. Your birthday. Another. Mother's Day. Then another. And another. The pile slowly grew. Each envelope still carried its original postmark. Each one carried the same heartbreaking stamp. Return to sender. No dramatic music was needed. No explanation was needed. The evidence spoke for itself. Monica never raised her voice. She simply continued. The first year, David wrote 12 letters. She looked toward Nolan. One every month. She held up another stack. The second year, he wrote 6. Then she lifted several more tied together with blue ribbon. After that, at least one birthday card. One Mother's Day card. One Christmas card. Every single year. She opened one envelope just enough to remove a folded card. Without reading the personal message inside, she turned it toward the camera. The front read, "Thinking of you today. Mom." The inside remained private. She slid it back into the envelope. We never opened these after they were returned. We kept them exactly as they came back. Nolan slowly looked at my mother. "Mrs. Harper, did you receive these?" Silence. He asked again. "Did you send them back?" Still silence. Finally, my mother spoke. Her voice trembled. "I didn't want pity." Monica answered softly. "Then why didn't you open even one?" No reply. She picked up a framed photograph from the box. It was our wedding picture. On the back was a handwritten note. "I wish Dad could be standing beside us today. We wish you were here too. Love always, David and Monica." The package had also been returned unopened. I hadn't seen that photograph in years. I had forgotten Monica had saved it. She turned toward the livestream camera. David never stopped trying to come home. He only stopped knocking after the door stayed closed for 11 years. Nobody spoke. The comments on Nolan's monitor were scrolling so quickly they were impossible to read. Nolan looked down, then back at my mother. "Were you aware David kept reaching out?" She covered her face with both hands. "I thought—" She stopped. "What did you think?" Nolan asked quietly. "I thought if I kept sending everything back, he'd understand." Understand what? That he'd chosen her. I finally found my voice. "No, Mom. I chose Monica as my wife. I never stopped choosing you as my mother." She looked at me for the first time all afternoon. There were tears in her eyes, real ones this time. Monica stepped closer. Her voice remained gentle. "Mom, no one is asking you to love David more than Ethan. No one ever asked for that." She placed one hand on the box. "But you didn't have to spend 11 years convincing your own son he wasn't worth loving." Those words settled over the room like a prayer. No one argued, no one shouted. There was nothing left to defend. My mother turned toward Nolan. "Please, stop the live stream." Nolan slowly shook his head. "I can't. You asked us to tell the truth." He glanced at the box. "I think we finally have." Monica closed the lid. She didn't humiliate my mother any further. She didn't read the letters aloud. She didn't expose private memories. She simply said, "I think this conversation is over." Our security manager quietly walked Nolan's crew and my mother to the front door. As she stepped outside, my mother turned back once. Our eyes met. For the first time in my life, I didn't see anger. I saw regret. The video spread across the country faster than any of us could have imagined. Within a few days, millions of people had watched the live stream. News outlets discussed it. Radio hosts talked about it. Complete strangers debated our family over coffee and dinner tables. What surprised me most wasn't how many people defended me. It was how many wrote to say they understood my mother. Not because they agreed with what she had done, but because they recognized how quietly resentment can grow inside an ordinary family until no one remembers where it began. I declined every interview request. Our foundation released only one short statement. Family pain should never become entertainment. We hope this conversation encourages more honesty and more forgiveness wherever possible. Then we went back to work. The scholarships continued. The emergency grants continued. The children still needed help. Life kept moving. About 3 weeks later, Ethan called. "Can I come by?" "You never have to ask." He arrived just before sunset, carrying nothing but 2 cups of coffee. For a long time, we sat on my back porch without saying much. Finally, he sighed. I keep thinking maybe I should have seen this coming. You couldn't have. I should have protected you. I shook my head. No. You've spent your whole life trying to protect everyone. He stared into his coffee. Mom's still my mother. I know. I can't stop loving her. I know. But after what she did, his voice broke. I don't know how to love both of you anymore. I leaned back in my chair. When I finally answered, I heard my father's voice more than my own. Ethan, you don't have to choose. He looked at me. Blood may make us relatives, but love is what makes us family. You don't owe me less because you love Mom. And you don't owe Mom less because you love me. You have room in your heart for both. He wiped his eyes. I was afraid you'd ask me to walk away from her. I smiled. I've already lost one parent. I'm not going to ask my brother to lose one too. He walked across the porch and hugged me the way he had when we were boys. For a moment it felt as though my father were standing with us again. A month later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting belonged to my mother. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses. She simply admitted that every returned letter had been her choice. She wrote that somewhere along the way she had started measuring love as though there wasn't enough to go around. She had spent years trying to protect one son from living in another son's shadow. Instead, she had nearly lost them both. At the end of the letter, she wrote only one sentence. I don't expect another chance. I only wanted you to know that your father was right and I was wrong. I folded the letter carefully. I wasn't ready to answer. Maybe one day I would be. Maybe I wouldn't. Forgiveness isn't a deadline. It's a journey. That evening, I finally opened the sealed envelope my father had given me before he died. His words were written in the steady handwriting I had known all my life. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to remind you who you are. I couldn't change your mother's heart, but don't let her pain change yours. Never make Ethan pay for mistakes that aren't his, and never believe even for a moment that you were anything less than my son. I read those lines twice. Then I walked into the living room where Monica was placing another family photograph on the mantel. I wrapped my arms around her. She didn't ask what the letter said. She already knew. I looked at my father's picture beside the fireplace and smiled. The greatest inheritance he ever gave me wasn't a company. It wasn't stock. It wasn't money. It was the courage to keep choosing love when bitterness would have been easier. If you've listened this far, thank you for sharing part of your day with me. If this story reminded you of someone who loved you without conditions, or someone you still hope to reconcile with, I hope you'll share that in the comments. And if stories about family forgiveness and second chances speak to your heart, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined me again. Until next time, take good care of the people who choose to love you.